in the annual review because the law does not require it. And pretty much that's the additional reason for policy 514 also. It's not required for annual review, but you, as the committee, could recommend that it continue with annual review.
And that's in the next policy to come. Not 208,
Oh, I'm sorry.
just,
Did I have the wrong policy? Policy 208, I thought you
208,
wanted to add. Yeah, if they
That's-
removed 514 and
Yeah.
522,
yep,
That's, yeah, that's right.
right?
got it.
Okay.
Okay, any questions, comments?
Yeah, I actually do. There was one thing that I had noticed with the second review of this policy, and I wanted to suggest a change to accurately reflect how we're making policy, and that is under 6 responsibilities. Item B, district administrators. And while it's true that it is administrators' responsibility to inform subordinates of existing policies, I wanted to add, administrators are responsible for presenting all recommendations for change in ISD 191 policy to the school board for consideration. And then district administrators are also responsible for informing their subordinates, ... Since that's actually how we make policy.
So in number 6, so are you saying you want A and B together, or?
A and B together? No, I think.
Or am I on the wrong, what
Roman
subtitle
numeral
is it
6
under?
Roman numeral 6.
Right.
New item B,
Oh.
district administrators.
Oh, okay.
To add, and the language would be, sorry, I keep going to the wrong document. The language would be, administrators are responsible for presenting all recommendations for change in ISD 191 policy to the school board for consideration, period. District administrators are also responsible for informing their subordinates of existing policies, ... and keeping the rest of it the same.
Yeah, so under B for district administrators.
Correct, just
Yeah.
district administrators, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Just want to make sure we're on the, because I read A and B, and I was trying to think of which
A
we were
says
talking about.
reviews
Okay.
recommended, but who's presenting it? It's not,
Administrators.
it's implicit that it's administrators.
Yep, so we're just
So
filling
not
it
to add it there, but into B.
under administrators, because that's the responsible, it's about the responsibilities of that group.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other than that, I had nothing,
Did you get that, Jamie? Okay.
and I can email it to you if you want.
That would be great. I got one.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions, or? I do like the changes, though. I do think it makes it a little more clear and more specific, and the grammar and the updates seem to be a little, they've cut out a lot of unnecessary words.
Thank you, sorry, Erin.
Okay, then, so moving right along then to policy 515, protection and privacy of public pupil, which that word, pupil records. Oh, and this is presented by Stacy Silvine, our Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just bringing to you Policy 515, MSBA's recommendations. They are adding a section on education support services data, which is on 515-4, Section F, just relating to other services that students may be provided with other government or sub-entities that are contracted with government agencies. Just identifying that that is private data, that is not open for disclosure, The other changes that are being made are on 515.2 under directory information, just some rewording, kind of going less specific as far as photographs of students taking part in officially recognized activities, just leaving it open to photographs as directory information on the front end. MSBA is recommending that the directory information is on record that generally would be not generally be considered harmful or an invasion of privacy if disclosed. It is a little bit more broad, but it is still specific as far as the photograph, date and place of birth, major field of study, et cetera, and that. So just a little bit of wordsmithing under directory information, and then also calling out the education support services data is private information and is not directory or public. Other than that, the changes are minimal throughout the rest of it, just rewording, clarification, spelling out the United States section codes, et cetera. So with that, recommend adopting the changes at this level.
Well, and I think one of the reasons that it came back was Director Connor had a question about pupil versus student.
Yeah.
Were you able
Right.
to?
Yeah.
Yep.
And from
It's-
the feedback that we received from MSBA is thus statute and federal codes are written as such. They're all over the board as well. So when we have different language that pertains to specific items that comes out of statute or federal code, it just mimics what the government has done. So if you want it to be all pupil or student, that's fine. There is no, it doesn't really matter, except it's just trying to mirror the legislative language that it's coming from.
Okay, because in all of our other policies, and, you know, reading through all of them, and even as it describes student, and it never refers to pupil. That word is so old and outdated. I just think it should all be consistent and all say pupil.
I have no
I mean,
prob-
student instead of pupil.
So then, if
Student
we're
to be
gonna,
pupil or pupil to be student?
Well, it should, no, it should get rid of, get rid of pupil and say student, because it does throughout the language anyway in the policy. I didn't see anywhere else where it said pupil besides right in the title there.
And again, it won't change the impact is what we're hearing. It just mirrors the laws, and the laws are all over the board.
and I guess the question is, if we're going to make the change from pupil to student, then we would need to go through our other policies and be consistent.
They all say that I found. I didn't see any other one that said,
I wouldn't want to say that all of them say that, because
Well-
it's been a while
well,
since
this
I've looked
policy
through.
then.
Right, this policy, yeah.
So that's what we're concerned about. And throughout this policy, it always uses the word student. I did not see one reference to pupil.
Yes, I get that. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm fine with changing it to student, but then staff would need to make a note that that's what the rest, as we go through policies, that we're going to be consistent across all of the policies if we're going to say student, and make sure that if there's, any kind of federal or state change in terminology, that then we go back and make sure that it is aligned to that. Does that make
Change
Mag-
to student.
Yeah,
Yep,
because
change
it's,
over to
that's the
student.
only word
Yep.
you'd have to change anyway. All the rest say student anyway.
Yep,
so.
that's fine. Okay, any other questions?
Nope.
Okay,
Okay. So let's review, okay, so on to policy 104. And let me see what that is. That is, mission, our school district mission statement, and that's gonna be presented by Aaron Tinkleberg. Or Tinklenberg.
In a minute, he's coming. Put a link. I think I was gonna cover it.
When it rains, it pours.
Put the link. Yeah, good.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So this is the school district mission statement. You can see that what we're recommending is removing anything that's not the mission statement, basically to align a little bit closer to MSBA recommended policy. And instead of including the core values and the vision statement in the policy, simply referencing the strategic roadmap, which the board has also approved, both in online inherent in the policy. So also some minor language changes in the general statement of policy, just correcting one note and again referencing the vision, core values, and strategic directions to be a little clearer and aligned with the language of the roadmap. And similarly in the review, just clarifying that language a little bit.
Okay. I had a comment. If you have one while I'm finding the paragraph, you can go ahead,
Okay.
Director Earl.
No, I thank you for the background. That was going to be my question, so I appreciate that.
This is 104, page 2 of 3. This is 2 of 3. Well, I had a, under keep, okay, I see. Under responsibilities, I just didn't think that A and B should be stricken, because to me, that's very pertinent to what we do, what the responsibilities are. Just, if you just read those two under responsibilities,
Yeah, I think I saw those as being redundant with the general statement of policy.
oh,
In the
okay.
second half of the general statement, it says, "The school board, on behalf of and with extensive participation by the community, should develop a consensus among its members regarding the nature of the enterprise the school board governs." It doesn't mention the superintendent's responsibilities there, so certainly if
Add that back.
we could add those sections back in just to clarify that those are the responsibilities of those two groups, or the board and the superintendent.
I would be fine with moving what is currently Roman numeral 6B up to general, under the statement of policy, and following the school board, that general statement about responsibilities.
So basically,
Needed to.
yeah, so that the responsibilities would be completely included in the general statement
General
of
statement of
policy.
policy, keep it clean.
And then what about the superintendent will assist the school board in the,
That's the one we. would
That's the
move
one we
back.
moved.
That's the one we would move up to 2, because it references the school board under 2.
okay, okay. All right.
That-
And any other comments or?
No, thank you, Erin.
Policy 508, extension of school year for certain students with IEPs, and that's presented by Amy.
Hi,
Hi,
good
Amy.
evening. Director Connor, Director Alt. This policy was actually reviewed in March of 2022, so all the updates and everything that we did to the policy, changing some things around, happened then. Minnesota School Board Association just changed a couple of the legal references outlining that, so that's the only change to this policy is in the legal references.
I have no comment on that one either, just seemed like it was straightforward and just legal references. Cross references. What you, Director Alt?
Nope, I have no comments.
Okay.
All right.
509, non-resident student enrollment, and that's presented by our own Stacy again, Solvine.
All right, bring policy 509 forward, enrollment of non-resident students, often commonly referred to as open enrollment. MSBA is just updating again their language, spelling out Minnesota statute sections, et cetera. There are no substantial changes being offered throughout the policy from them.
I also saw nothing that brought any attention or comment that I had on that policy. Darrell? Did you have anything?
I did not.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for asking.
All right. Moving on to,
Thank you.
we're just playing musical chairs tonight. Moving on to student recruiting policy 517. And that's going to be presented by our Assistant Superintendent, Chris Beaumont.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm presenting to you Policy 517 on student recruiting. It is a policy that also incorporates or is done in conjunction with the bylaws of the Minnesota State High School League. The only recommendation from the Minnesota School Boards Association is to remove the MSBA Service Manual, Chapter 10, Minnesota State High School League, from the cross-references.
I had no comment or discussion about 517. It seems pretty straightforward. Director Roll?
Dr. Belmont, I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Tuesday, Policy 525, Violence Prevention, and that's going to be presented by Superintendent Battle.
Thank you. So we have some minor changes based on MSBA revisions. So under 3, implementation of policy H, they spelled out Minnesota and added, also spelled out statutes and added section. And then also minor change under the legal references, updated the legal references.
And in reading through that policy, I had no questions or comments on that. Director Alt?
No, no questions, no comments.
All right, and we are at Policy 527, Student Use and Parking, and it's presented by Mr. Bolt.
Thank you. Yes, Policy 527, Student Use and Parking of Motor Vehicles. There are some additional clarifications provided by the School Board Association since the policy last came in front of the board January of this year. It added clarification about and broadened some of the terms around designated spaces and areas, in addition to providing opportunities for school boards, for the board or for the districts, some school districts to choose to allow students to park their cars in school district locations such as designated student parking lots by permit only, that it can expand the definition as needed. The last note was some legal references that were added based on Minnesota statute.
So I'm not sure if we're looking at the same copy of policy, because the only changes I see are under legal references. I don't see any policy changes in the body of the policy.
Yes, this may be part of my new learning I have some blue text, so I assume those were additions from the School Board Association. Okay.
So maybe it can come
I'm gonna
back.
make a
Yeah, sorry,
mistake.
Dr. Belmont.
Make sure you see some of the added language around
Yeah.
which spaces are.
Thank you.
Yeah, the blue.
Okay, so that's gonna be,
Assumed it was the same as the red.
and
Oh, yeah, the blue is just their note to us. I don't think they're changes, but we'll bring it back.
Okay,
okay,
Blue
you
is
don't think
just a no, the blue is just a note telling us,
oh,
yeah, that's what the.
So
blue-
the only changes in policy are
Is the
the
cross-
legal references.
Then it would
Is
just
that
be the
right?
legal
The
references.
blue is
Oh, okay.
just,
Then-
some districts may choose to allow students to park their cars. It is 4, number 4, student
addition.
parking is an addition, so we'll bring it back.
Okay,
Okay.
awesome.
I'll dig in a little
you
bit.
guys, okay.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Yeah, and I just,
The next one, too. Yeah.
had one comment on, when I read student use and parking of motor vehicles, it sounds like a break in the sentence. It sounds like it should say, student use of motor vehicles and parking.
Where are you?
Which
Tony?
section?
Just the very
Title.
top statement, the policy 527. Because when you say student use, you almost think like use of what? And then, of course, in parking and motor vehicles, shouldn't it just say student use of motor vehicles in parking? Because that's what they're using? You know what I mean? Maybe I just interpret things
Yeah.
differently, which I probably do. I understand that, but it just sounds like a break in the sentence or like something's,
I can inquire a little more about that.
I'm fine with it as it is.
I guess I just read things different.
Yeah, it may be the legal terminology to encompass everything.
Well, not a big deal. It just, when I read it, it just sounds like
We'll
it
bring
would
it.
sound better to say that, but that's fine.
Yep, bring it back.
And you're reviewing that anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
It'll come back.
Got the next one, too.
Yeah, because that's what we're doing, student use of motor vehicles and parking. Okay. 520, any other comments? Okay. No, I didn't. 528, student parental and family. And that's presented by Mr. Beaumont also, or Superintendent
Yes,
Beaumont.
thank you. District 528, student parental, family, and marital status, non-discrimination was also last in front of the board January 13th of this year, and is aligned to the Minnesota School Boards Association policy with just a small change to the cross-reference.
No questions, Dr. Belmont, thank you.
Okay.
I believe that was, it seemed very familiar, so yes. Okay, and 529, staff notifications by Mr. Beaumont.
Yeah, thank you. So 529, staff notification of violent behavior by students. This does, this is aligned to School Board Association policy as well as state statute. Did not see any significant changes except for in the reference area. To align to statutes.
No comments here.
Okay, I had a note about that. Just find it. Number 3. Oh, this one's just so long. What sort of? I have down reference number 3, but I should have put the oh, maybe I did. No, I should have put the page. So obviously that's, let me look one more time really quick. Bear with me, please.
Sure, no problem.
Well. Person employed by school board as a temporary substitute. That is okay. That is okay. Okay.
Okay.
All right. 532, use of peace officers. And it didn't say any presenter on that one.
Same for me still, sorry. One more. Thank you. One more.
Okay.
The 532 is the use of peace officers and crisis teams to remove students with IEPs from school grounds, clarifies processes and expectations for school personnel and our school resource officers. Again, very few changes, if any. School Board Association 2022 is actually last in front of the board in April. Changes to some of the legal references.
No comments here.
Me either. No questions or comments for me.
Thank you.
Okay. And then we're on to policy 533, wellness, presented by Amy.
Yep.
Like, that's
So this policy was actually just reviewed in August, and so significant changes were made at that time. So the only updates, again, are in the legal references places in one area. Go onto the website.
This one also seemed very familiar, so we just review it, so
Yeah,
I
this
have no
one's the
questions or
newest one.
comments on it.
I don't have any questions either.
Okay. Either one of us have questions or comments?
All right.
Good.
Okay, and policy 601, school district curriculum by Amina.
So policy 601 just has reference updates, legal updates, and then just non-substantive changes into the references in the policy itself, so.
I did have a comment on that one. Let's see if I can find it. 6013. So 13. When reading through the policy, I kind of alluded to see anything that mentioned about world history. I mean, it says global, but does that mean the same thing?
Yes, and so when you look at the social studies standards, the world history is embedded, I mean, it's the same as global history.
Okay. 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 Let's see, was there anything else? Oh, there was no, I know in another policy that had to do with, curriculum, I believe the time frame was every 7 years. Is that something that,
So MSBA
yeah,
recommends every 7 years. School districts are free to set whatever curriculum review cycle process that they feel fits for them. Because, at least for our district, we don't set a specific number like that because different areas in the curriculum are reviewed on different time cycles.
oh, okay.
So we would review literacy more often than we would review physical education, for example,
Oh, okay.
simply because of the change in standards. And so we try to align that with the changes of the standards from the Department of Education so that it fits within that cycle. So they may review at different times,
Okay.
but we try to follow behind that.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that, because I was just wondering if we needed to review that a little more often than that for curriculum. But if you
Yes.
say we do it kind of bit by bit, then that's fine, that makes sense.
We do review some areas more often than
Yes,
that.
yes, great. Okay. I had no other questions or comments to you, Director Rowe?
I do not.
Okay. All right, and then moving on to policy 602, organization of school calendar. And Chris, you're up again.
Yeah, it's a fun night. Thank you for having me. This policy, organization of school calendar and school day, comes in alignment with the School Boards Association recommendations. It does statute, and the MSBA seems to be trending towards broadening some of the conditions when it comes to the school calendar, so that's reflected in this policy, and as well as some changes to some of the legal references or additions.
And if you happen to know, when again do we decide the school calendar? Because, because I know it was either last year or the year before, I think it was last year, we decided what the school calendar would be for 23 up to 24, I believe. So then when do we decide from then on? And I'll tell you why, because I have a couple parents that, well, not a couple, but a few, that had mentioned to me why we cut down the Christmas break to a week when it used to be 2 weeks.
Right.
And I remember when my kids were in school too, even though they might have been in a different district, but that it was 2 weeks. So I just thought maybe I'd ask if you happen to know, and then I could tell them why.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that question. We have been in the process this fall to bring forth recommendation to the board as soon as we're done for the 2024-25 calendar.
Okay.
Per policy, we would want to have that in no later than November 1st, but
Oh, okay.
hoping for that. And then the winter break is a conversation. We have met with students, parents, teachers, administrators, just to get input. Wendy Drugi and I are kind of working on it in partnership, and there are some trends that are coming out that we're going to be excited to share with you.
Oh,
Fortunately, the trends seem to go across different lenses of people. So. And one of them is the longer winter break. I'm sorry, Dr. Battle. I was just going to say, sometimes the winter break has kind of been circumstantial on where certain features of the winter break fall.
and I'm surprised a little bit at that, because a lot of parents are just the opposite. They want their kids back in school, but these particular parents, it's like, well, why did you cut it down to a week instead of 2 weeks?
So one of the other factors, as Dr. Belmont said, is the change in the calendar. As you know, there are some holidays that are on a Sunday, but also we have to look at the number of instructional hours for each of our students, as well as the number of duty days in our contracts. And so if you recall, in the fall, we had 4 days without students, professional development day, and then the conference days. So you also look at that too. And so that might shorten the winter break. So it's always trade-offs. So we have policy that guides us, the basic framework, but then we have the other considerations too. So it does change.
And we also know that, it's a mix for our families, right? There are some families that, and students who are really happy to have that longer winter break. There are others for whom a shorter winter break is preferred and a little easier to manage. So, kind of making sure we're thinking about our families. So, Dr. Belmont, you said you're talking with, of course, Wendy Drugi and staff and families and students to get input as you create the next calendar?
That's correct. We have essentially a focus group of around 15 people, and then we meet twice this semester. So we have another meeting coming up here in January. They're collecting input and identifying those trends. We're pretty close to.
Because when I think about, having just seen our enrollment report, the second, one of the larger groups of families in our district are Muslim families. And I'm interested in understanding what our families and students are saying about Eid. I know we've talked about this in the past, and, Eid is one of those holidays that, you don't know when it's going to, what day it's going to be. You can narrow it down to 1 or 2 days. I'll continue to ask the question, though, that, is there any way for us to be able to do a better job of accommodating a holiday for, the next large, we have our, large group of Christians, we have a large group of Muslims. How are we helping them?
Director, all of you may recall, former Assistant Superintendent Brian Gersich had a group take a look at that, and there were some different parameters. We have applied those to the upcoming calendars that will be presented to you. So I think you'll see some of those parameters to making our calendar more inclusive.
Awesome. And I know we were able to actually get, I don't know if it must be next school year. We have spring break the same week that Eid takes place. So that just kind of works out for.
And one of the other considerations, you want pretty much equal quarters and semesters, and sometimes
Yes.
it just works out.
Yep.
Based on that consideration.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's good, thank you for that discussion. Okay, policy 603, curriculum development, presented by Amina.
Right. So policy 603 is getting a revamp. The content of the policy is not significantly changed, however, to be in alignment with MSBA, which does detail some specific items from statute. We have made some shifts and changes. And so the organization of our policy will now be slightly different, and it will align directly with statute. So first of all, with the district advisory committee, while does appear to be a lot of strike-throughs, if you look down toward the new text of A, B, C, D, E, and F, you'll find almost all of the same content in addition to the components of under C, which would be support to accelerate academic and native literacy and achievement of English learners with various needs. And I appreciated including that language in there, especially with the approval of the new Somali heritage class as a companion to our Somali Spanish class as well. And so continuing to support that native literacy for our students as well.
Board hasn't, it's native Somali class?
Somali
Well,
heritage class?
They have the course coming up at an upcoming
Oh.
meeting.
So we haven't approved it yet.
Haven't
All
approved
right,
it yet.
I was going to say, I didn't think I missed
I
it.
know where she was going.
Yes, and so it has been through our internal approval process, and it will be brought before the board as part of the changes and updates to the high school registration handbook.
That was part of the feedback we had during the budget. Feedback sessions for the public was they would like to see more courses added. And one of the courses was that Somali heritage language
So
course.
then that would go through the budget process first before we approve the course catalog. I'm imagining. If it's a new class.
So I'm not sure that it would be an additional FTE.
I don't know.
Yeah, so, no.
It's not intended to be an additional FTE. It falls under the same electives as world language electives, and so students will just simply be shifting where they are taking electives to that particular one, or whether they're taking a language, they may shift to
So
that language.
I don't want to get too much into
Yeah.
this, and maybe this is a conversation for offline, but in order to add that, what's being dropped?
We may not have to drop anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it may,
So we have to hire somebody to teach the class.
So sometimes we have people who are licensed in multiple areas, so it may not be. There's a
I'm just raising it
complexity.
because it might well be a budget conversation, and Dr. Battle, I'm
Right.
sure that you'll
I don't
navigate
anticipate
that.
that there's going to be a subtraction.
I don't anticipate that
Yeah.
it will have an impact on the budget. It may shift where the FTE staff is, but it won't add FTE staff to the high school.
And I was just going to say that we really don't, so the way course registration works is students select based on a whole variety
Sure.
of different course options.
Yeah.
And then based on those selections, budgetary recommendations are made. So it wouldn't, it doesn't necessarily, more oftentimes than not, there's ways to kind of guide the students into the different spaces after they've made their choices that don't necessarily result in needing to add FTEs.
So it'll come into play in the staffing by business unit, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
One question that I did, one comment that I did want to make. 6033, page 6033, Roman numeral 4, District Advisory E. This isn't policy necessarily, but since we're talking about it, it would be really great if a member of that advisory committee could be present when that information, when their recommendation is being brought to the board, that it's not just staff. Because if there's an advisory committee, we'd like to have, a representative from that committee who's a parent. 6033, Roman numeral 5, school site team. And this is where I just want to caution staff, when you're making changes to policy, you need to make sure that you're starting with 191 policy and making changes, because in the last review of this policy,
No, wait, that's the next one. Sorry. 6033, school site team. Site team must include an equal number of teachers and administrators and at least one parent who is not also an employee of the school district. It would be nice to have, if we happen to have a staff member, that's a suggestion for policy change.
So you would like to add that caveat into the parent representative?
Who is not also an employee of the school district. If we have an employee who also happens to be a parent, wonderful. But having that, that independent hat would be nice.
So, Jamie, we'd like to add the language on section 5. At least one parent who is not an employee of the school district.
Thanks. That was all I had.
And for number 2, general statement of policy. Just throwing this out here, not saying it has to be these exact words, but curriculum is very important right now because, we're doing changes and people are very specific about what they want to see changed and what they don't and whatnot. I just think maybe curriculum development shall be directed toward the fulfillment of goals and objectives of education program of the school district. And how did I say that? With truth and accuracy. I don't know, or if you want to say something less, not so maybe harsh. I don't know.
How do you define truth and accuracy in policy?
With the curriculum development, just with that number 2 statement, that sentence, just that.
No, I know, but how do you implement truth and accuracy?
So-
Whose definition of truth and
I
accuracy?
think that's where we look through our standards, which then guide the curriculum development. So as part of the Minnesota setting and establishing the standards, they do get feedback. And they do distinguish with facts. So I don't know if you wanted to say more.
Right, I just want to clarify that our curriculum is based in fact and accuracy, is what your reference? So I would want to go back and look to see if there is a different place where that is
Referenced?
referenced
Yeah,
and.
because I didn't see that either. I was almost thinking about referencing it in policy 601, but I just thought, well, that maybe the committee will review that. But I figure if it's a general statement of policy, then maybe it could be worded in that way, but.
I'm wondering if it, actually, a statement like that might already be embedded in 604, which is the instructional curriculum, because 603 is the process for developing curriculum, whereas 604 is the actual instructional curriculum that exists after the development,
Oh, okay.
or that goes through that process.
That might be.
Okay.
Yep.
Does
I
that,
didn't see anything like that there, but okay. Okay.
Let us look.
Should, anything else? Should we move on to 604? Comments, questions?
No,
Okay.
I'm done.
so we
All
can
right.
move it for, you're saying we can move it forward with that wording change addition?
With the one, with
With
the
the one
the
change
parent,
for-
yeah.
Okay, great.
And we can see what the next policy brings in terms of truth and accuracy.
So that was 603, okay. And, okay, 604, instructional curriculum.
Right, and
Presented
so 604, the policy that we had was a minimalist policy, which can be very valuable. It did not necessarily have the level of detail that's found in the statute. It also, which left most of it to regulation and meeting statute. So I would say that there are statements in here that are able to guide us very specifically because they align directly with statute. And so when we have different sections in here, like the civics test, the college and career planning, these are things that we find, CPR instruction. All of these are components that are in statute already. They just weren't part of our policy because our policy tended to roll towards the more minimalist one. And so this is an expansion of our policy. For example, E is on our former policy, school districts shall assist all students by grade 6 and no later than grade 9 to explore their college and career interests. That has been expanded by MSBA to include all the language on college and career planning from the statute.
And what section is that found in?
It is now Section 5, college and career planning.
Okay.
Oh, okay. And then what paragraph was that? Okay, I got 5, college and career planning, and then what else? The number?
Right, and so that whole section,
Oh, that whole section.
A through F, aligns to the statute. Oh,
And I guess I'm not necessarily against making it more detailed, but I know typically the recommendation is that where you can just say it's statute, then we don't have to continually revise policy every time the state legislature changes itself.
right. So I think that just take the direction from the board. If you want it to align with an MSBA policy, this is what the MSBA policy aligns with. If you would like me to take it back and include and refer it back to a more minimalist with the updates from the statute in there, I certainly can do that.
Well, I guess what I'm looking for is, understanding MSBA's position, right? We're 191.
Yeah.
And looking for your recommendation in terms of what's going to work best for our district, because I like to start with MSBA, but I'm not against saying, you know what, this is really going to work best for our district. Do you believe that more detail is necessary? Is there an example maybe where the more vague policy language maybe worked against us?
I don't know if the vague policy necessarily worked against us, but as we have, as we face what might be challenges to our curriculum or the content of our curriculum, this makes it very clear where we select that curriculum from, and that what things are within our control and which things are not within our control. And so by identifying each of the areas of the standards, when parents are concerned about a specific topic or content, it takes it back to the parent to select for their child as opposed to selecting for all children.
And obviously statute is included here, so that if anybody wanted to reference the policy against the statute, that's
Yes.
fine.
So I do have the MSBA. It was to be more explicit about the addition of the parental curriculum review statutory requirement.
And what
And
section is that?
adjust for, and then to separate the CPR, AED training, the college and career planning, and civics test provisions,
Okay.
to be clear.
Yeah.
That's why.
Got it. So, and I guess if that's your recommendation, I'm good with it. I just don't, I would prefer not to hear this is what MSBA is saying, right?
And I would tend to support this because MSBA is trying to guide us toward those protections.
Yep.
I do appreciate the fact that they have called out in Section 3, that was the other thing I wanted to share with you, was the parental curriculum review, which really does lay out the statute for how parents may control what content their students are experiencing in the schools. And this is the same statute that I used when we reviewed Policy 606 for instructional materials. And the opt-out form that's included in there actually references this statute and would align with policy, with this particular policy, and so.
And I guess the only other statement that I was going to make, that I started making with the other policy, is please just make sure you're starting with 191 language, and editing 191 language so that we can clearly see the changes, like where the strike-throughs are, where you're adding things in. So, for instance, under Roman numeral 5, college and career planning, I remember we had extensive conversation earlier in the year about when the school district shall assist all students. And the language which you read just now was by grade 6 and no later than grade 9. That is 191 unique. And that would be something, you know, if you believe that that doesn't make sense, call that out. I personally would like to keep, given what the policy committee had discussed earlier in this year, and that we had landed on assist all students by grade 6 and no later than grade 9, I would just ask that that be, you know, consider that we edit that so that it gives at least that window, given that that's already the way we do it.
Yes, and that is our practice.
Yeah.
So Jamie,
Agreeance with that.
for,
If Tony agrees. You good?
Well,
You good with it?
from what I understand, didn't we discuss that before?
Yeah, that's why she's saying we should add the grade 6 back.
Because it was taken
Section
out with
5A.
the changes.
By grade 6, no later than grade 9.
Oh, I thought I just heard the grade 9 part.
So that's
Okay.
what came forward with this revision. Previously, we had discussed and agreed upon by grade 6, no later than grade 9, because that's the current practice. And policy would be reflecting what we're currently doing.
It's kind of tricky because grade 6 is a little young. And I guess it kind of depends. My side as a parent, you know, it depends on the level of, yeah. I mean, if it's age appropriate, I mean, kids have to know about world history. I mean, grade 6 might be a little young, maybe junior high, on middle school up. So
This is college and career planning,
just a
Tony. It's not
college.
world history. It's college and career planning, Roman
Section
numeral
5.
5.
Well, then where is this grade 6 through 9 coming in? No earlier than grade 6 and in between?
So if you scroll down to the bottom of the policy,
We're still on 60,
we're on 6,
604.
604, yep, at the bottom of the policy, Roman letter E, it said, "The school district shall assist all students by grade 6 and no later than grade 9 to explore their college and career interests and aspirations and develop a plan for a smooth and successful transition to post-secondary education or employment."
Okay.
So that was stricken. With the MSBA update, I believe it was just an oversight because the committee had already, that was already our policy language. What's coming forward in this revision under Roman numeral 5, you can see under A. And I'm saying we should add back under college and career planning the language that we currently have, which is by grade 6 and no later than grade 9, specifically for college and career planning.
Yeah. That makes it clear. Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah, no problem.
Sometimes I have to actually see stuff in writing for it to make sense.
And there's
True.
a lot of red lines too. Yeah.
so many red lines.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely, because, yeah, I'm very concerned as a parent that the children learn world history and they learn it correctly too. I mean, I know you're talking about college and preparedness, but I'm just saying. Okay. 5 minutes? Okay. So, we're on our last thing, I believe. Okay, any other? Okay, so that's gonna be,
Just to note that in section 6, I do have the 191, I did put specific language in for 191 about the civics test by including the class of 2017-2018 school year, simply because it reflects our students who are in the 7-year graduation. So
okay.
that was the only other thing.
Thanks.
Okay, so the last one then is policy 620, credit for learning.
Yep, and that one I believe has no substantive changes.
Right. And then also, we have 206 that has no changes also. Any comments on that one? Oh, first, we'll go back to 620. Do you have any comments?
I have no comments on
And
620.
602? It says.
Oh, 206,
I
yep.
mean, what, 206?
So, 206, I asked this to come forward because I want to make sure that 191 families and students and our community members are heard at our listening sessions. So there are two recommendations for change under Roman numeral 6, listening session protocols. First, each speaker, currently it says each speaker should provide his or her name, address, the name of group, et cetera, et cetera.
What number is that, Director? I'm sorry.
1.
Just on 1, go ahead.
Yep. I'm suggesting each speaker must provide his or her name, address, the name of the group represented, et cetera, so that we know we're hearing from our 191 student, staff, residents that have an affiliation with the district.
And where did you want to put that again?
It's under Roman numeral 6, listening session
E1.
protocols. I believe it was 1.
Okay.
A1.
Okay.
A1.
Agenda items.
All right.
The next was for student and staff data privacy concerns, just wanting to make sure that we're not violating our student and staff privacy. Under Roman numeral 6, add a number 9. Video and audio recordings of listening sessions are prohibited. The school board reserves the right to conclude the listening session in the event that such recordings are being made. Because the problem with the recordings is if there's information that is shared about an individual student or a staff member that violates their data privacy, we have no way of pulling that back, and we are liable for it.
Does that impede with the rights of a public hearing, though? I mean,
It's
public-
not, it's not a
It's not
hearing.
public.
It's a
It's a
public
listening-
hearing is different.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
public hearing is different.
Okay.
Listening session is before every board meeting, right, where people come for half an hour
Right.
and talk with us.
Right. Okay, and that's what you're talking about?
That's all I'm talking about,
Okay.
yeah.
Seems
And I'll
reasonable.
send you the language, Jamie.
Okay,
Thank you.
so that's going to be something that's going to be reviewed and changed. Okay. So we got to quickly wrap this up to, anything else? Okay, so 208, definitely review. 515,
First reading?
Is it first reading for
First
208?
reading.
first reading, but
First reading.
also
Yep.
review. Yeah. Because you're going to be bringing back
15.
something. You're going to still be bringing back, well, I don't know, I didn't write down all that.
It's
but
first
anyway.
reading.
Okay, so 515, first reading and review. 104, review,
First
well,
reading.
first reading. 508, I believe, can be consent,
Just
because I believe
legal
the only thing
references.
changed was the legal references. 509 also should be able to be consent. 517, consent. 525, I believe that was consent, couldn't be consent. 527 is first reading review.
Bring it back.
It's returning to
It's
us.
return
Yeah,
it back.
or return,
Yeah,
okay, that's
the
why I
one.
said review.
Yeah.
I guess I call review, if you have to review something,
Return.
bring it back to us, was just called returning, okay.
Mm.
All right, we changed that, returning. Okay, 528, status. I don't believe we had anything on that one,
Consent.
so consent. And 529, I believe that was consent also. 532, first reading, but I believe that was consent because it was just about the officers. And 533, that should be first reading or consent,
Consent.
consent. 601, first reading.
Consent.
Is that the big one? Yeah, changes.
Curriculum had minor. It was
Yeah,
instruction.
604 was
Yeah,
the big
yeah,
one.
yep.
603, I'm sorry. Okay,
No, that's
sorry.
60, yeah, we're on 601.
So that's consent, 601.
Okay. And then
602.
602, consent.
603. 603.
603, I believe, we're returning.
First reading.
That's
First
the big
reading.
one.
And 604, first reading or review.
First reading.
First reading.
First reading, yeah. Credit for,
And, oh, I said first, yeah. Okay, and then 620 consent.
yeah.
And then 206, you're returning information with that one, aren't you?
It's first reading.
That's 206 rather, I keep wanting to say 602.
It's first reading.
That's
I'm
first
just,
reading, because you just presented it.
right.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, everyone. It was tight, but we got through it. Appreciate you all.
Okay.
And
It's adjourned.
602.
Yep.
Okay.